And joining me now from Helsinki, the site of the Trump-Putin summit, is the U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Jon Huntsman. Ambassador Huntsman, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
Let me start with a simple question. Is this summit still on, and if so, why?
Well, listen, it isn't a summit. I've heard it called a summit. This is a meeting. In fact, it's the first meeting between the two presidents. They've had some pull-asides, one at the G20 in Hamburg and the other at the APEC ministerial in Da Nang, Vietnam. But this is really the first time for both presidents to actually sit across the table and have a conversation. And I hope it's a detailed conversation about where we might be able to find some overlapping and shared interests. This has not happened before. So there's a lot on our agenda that's been built up over now many years of a relationship that is terribly fraught. So yes, it will happen, and it should happen.
You obviously are making a distinction between a summit and a meeting. Is this because we don't have an agenda or we don't have deliverables? Because one of the things you said before in preparation is if you have a summit, you have to have an agenda and you have to have deliverables. Does that mean we're not going to have a deliverable out of this?
Well, listen, Chuck, you've been around for presidential summits. I've been around since Reagan's visit to China in the early 1980s. No state dinner, no joint statement, no deliverables that are going to be prepackaged. You don't know what's going to come out of this meeting. But what it will be is the first opportunity for these presidents to actually sit down across the table, alone and then with their teams, to talk about everything from meddling in the election to areas where we have some shared interests. You got to remember, Chuck, that Russia is a country of 11 time zones. It touches Asia, it touches the Middle East, it touches Western Europe. And it's inconceivable that we can solve some of the international issues without engaging Russia at some level. Now, right now, there's no trust in the relationship, and because of that, problem solving is practically impossible. So this is an attempt to see if we can diffuse and take some of the drama and quite frankly, some of the danger out of the relationship right now.
How did the indictments of 12 Russian military officers on Friday change the agenda?
Well, I don't think the details are a surprise to folks who have followed this. That now makes probably almost 30 Russians who have been rolled up by the Mueller indictment. That investigation continues, and I think the bigger picture is we need to hold the Russians accountable for what they did. Their malign activity throughout Europe as well. That's a part of the conversation that needs to take place. And again, Chuck, this is why it's so important to get our senior leaders together, because these conversations have happened at the local level. I'm on the ground. I'm on the front lines in Moscow. They happen at our level, but they haven't happened at the senior-most levels in the detail that we're likely to get tomorrow. That's why this gathering is important for one reason.
Two things. Will the president ask Putin to extradite the 12 Russian military officers? And have you formally requested that the Russian government do this? We don't have an extradition treaty, so we have to make a formal request. Have you already begun that paperwork?
Well, the FBI office in the embassy, no doubt, will work on that. I can't disclose any details in that regard. Requests can be made. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Russians are going to follow through with it. But we'll see if those steps will be taken. I can't make any announcement right here with you.
Is the president going to make the ask or not?
I don't know if he'll make the ask, but it may be part of the agenda. It may be part of their bilateral meeting together. We'll have to see. It just came onto the agenda last Friday, so it's something that's brand new.
Why does it matter so much that the president have a warm relationship with Putin, whether you want to call it a friendship or not? He's undertaken, this is Putin's actions, they're pretty outrageous, annexing Crimea, intervening in Syria to prop up a brutal dictator, interfering in our elections, and by the way, poisoning British citizens just recently in the UK. And yet we're bending over backwards, it looks like. The appearance, we're bending over backwards in order to have a relationship with Putin right now. Why?
Well, Chuck, you just started that long litany, that long list of grievances, and it goes on much longer than that. You have to remember there's a reason why every president in the post-Cold War period has tried to engage China, every president. And it has started a boom and a bust cycle that has left both sides dejected, angry at each other, finger-pointing, and it's because we set expectations way too high. We have resets,
Ambassador, let me pause you there. You said China. I assume you're referring to Russia.
I'm sorry. Of course, I'm referring
That's
to
what
Russia.
I thought. You obviously a former ambassador to China. Understandable. Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, Chuck. The redos and the resets, which have largely collapsed. So the objective here is to meet, to put our cards on the table. There isn't a thought that there would be a reset or a redo. We've looked at past history. We have interests, they have interests, and it's a function of seeing where some of those interests overlap. Now, they will overlap in the area of strategic stability and arms control, where we have a very important arms control agreement that is coming due in 2021. Russia's in violation of the INF treaty. That's got to be talked about. You've got some overlapping interest in Syria, where we've come very close to confrontation. We've got some shared interest with respect to the Korean Peninsula, where we both believe in a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, a strong Northeast Asia, and non-proliferation. So all of these are areas where conceivably we can strike up a conversation. But we have to remember that let history be our guide. These redos and these resets, they only get you so far, usually end in failure. We've got to put our cards on the table. We have to remember and recognize some of the malign activity that we have been through and approach this with our eyes wide open.
Let me ask you this. Does the president buy into the national security strategy assessment that was written in December of 2017? And it read as follows: China and Russia are determined to make economies less free and less fair, to grow their militaries, and to control information and data to repress their societies and expand their influence. Does the president buy into this?
Well, it's his team's document. I certainly assume so. And what you've just described, I can't imagine anyone would disagree with that assessment with either China or Russia.
On the issue of Crimea, can you say in no uncertain terms that the president is going to stick to the piece of paper he signed in Brussels with the fellow NATO leaders when he said that was never, nothing changes when it comes to Crimea? Is the president going to sort of stick to his belief that stick to the belief of NATO nations that Crimea belongs to Ukraine and not Russia?
The agenda is the president's. Everything will be his call, but I think it's highly unlikely that you'll see any change in Crimea. This was a violation of international law. What we've seen in eastern Ukraine is a violation of international law, an ongoing conflict in Donbass, the two so-called breakaway republics. We have some very real issues. This
but
is
you
not
didn't
a
rule it
conflict,
out,
Chuck.
Ambassador. I noticed you didn't rule it out. You said that it's the president's call, so he could very well just sort of say, you know what, even though everybody else doesn't think this is a good idea?
Of course, it's the president's call, but I think it's highly unlikely that that's going to emerge in their conversation, as you suggest. There's a lot more to talk about. Strategic stability, Syria, Ukraine, DPRK, our bilateral relationship. We've got a fraught bilateral relationship. The collective blood pressure between the United States and Russia is off the charts high. So it's a good thing these presidents are getting together.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.